Harbor One Hotline. Orlovsky joins us. That was pretty tough. Is that the first time you've been trolled by a sandwich company, Dan?
I'm not gonna lie. When you first started the Jimmy John's read, I was like, no way. Yeah, that is the first time. That is the first time that something like that has ever happened. It was a good shot by them. It was funny. Laura made it into a big deal. Thank you for that, Rutledge. But well done by Jimmy John's.
I think that means you've made it. You know, I mean, obviously you don't need me to tell you you've made it, but when you're getting roasted by Jimmy John's, I feel like that means you've arrived.
Yeah, that's when you, like, a life goal is to get a national sandwich chain to mock one of your down moments of life. That's when you know, like, all right, I'm in a good place.
I'm still working towards that myself. Dan, I'm not sure if you heard, but a bunch of Patriots potential offensive coordinator names have come out. Bill O'Brien's one of them, Keenan McCardell, and Nick Caley. Do any of those names jump out to you?
Yeah, Bill, because of his past history with the organization, the offensive success he had not only in New England but also in Houston. You know, I think the downside with and this was a gripe of mine when he was the head coach in Houston, was the lack of protection commitment. You know, schematically that happened, but you know he's had a really good run at Alabama and runs an offense. You know, he's around Steve Sarkisian, so that's an offense that Mac obviously was schematically and successful with. Keenan comes over from potential of time in Minnesota. Again, there's that offensive familiarity with the Mike Shanahan, Kyle Shanahan, Gary Kubiak system that's getting run in Minnesota. So I think those two names are, you know, guys that have a history of being around multiple offenses. Certainly one that I think Mac plays really well in, which is that, again, Kyle Shanahan tree type of offense. So those are two names. I have no idea if Keenan has any history of calling plays. I obviously know about him as a player, and he's coached for many years now. But I do like the fact that he's been around that offensive scheme.
It's an excellent point. After seeing a first-time offensive coordinator this year, even though he never had the title, and play caller in Matt Patricia, two of the three names here never operated as play caller in an NFL system, I believe. How much do you think that the Patriots should go over that experiment again when you're looking at these candidates that they've announced so far?
Yeah, I would never do that again this year. I just think, like, we've done that. I need somebody who's built offenses, coordinated offenses, stood in front of the room, called plays in, you know, the fourth quarter of a September game, called plays on a 1st and 15 December half, got to win it to get into the playoffs. I need that. And that's not to knock those guys, but you've got to have that experience. And I know everyone always says in these situations, well, it has to be your first time at some point. Yes. I just don't believe you want that in this situation for New England for the first time, to be in a third year of a rookie quarterback that, while very good, there isn't this, hey, physical talent can cover up for potential mistakes. There is a very specific way that Mac kind of needs offense to be called for him to play at a very high level. I just wouldn't do that again this year, no.
Dan, no matter who the new OC is going to be, it's going to be Mac's third OC in as many years. What's that mean, and what's that like for a young quarterback? How do you navigate that?
Well, traditionally, that spells disaster for young quarterbacks. You know, Justin Herbert's going to go through a very similar thing 3rd and 4 years with the Chargers. I always say the hardest part for young quarterbacks when they go to the NFL mentally is you not only have to learn something new scheme-wise, you have to forget the old. So Mac goes from Alabama to, okay, I know all of our offense in Alabama, our formations, our personnels, our protection calls, what we called this phrase or what we called this route concept. Now I go to New England, I have to learn a very complicated offense under Josh McDaniel. But before I do that, I have to forget all the other stuff in Alabama, because I might have called a 5-man protection at Alabama scat, and I might call it roar in New England, and I might call a 2-man pivot and in-route hammer at Alabama, and I might call it Wanda in New England. So, like, you have to forget the old stuff before you learn the new stuff. So then Mac had to do that again this year. Forget old stuff and learn new stuff. And that takes time. And when it's going so fast, your mind so often goes back to what the old stuff was, and you can get very quickly confused. Now this is the third time of having to go through that process. And while not impossible, and I understand everybody's a professional, it's just a hurdle that he has to continue to basically start all over again rather than master. And the reality is you want him in his third year mastering things, and he can't master things without the requisite time needed to build the foundation of the offense.
As you said there, everybody's a professional. I don't think it's any secret that there looks like there was some deteriorating relationships between at least some of the coaches and Mac behind closed doors. Now in the offseason, if you're the offensive coordinator coming into this situation, what is the first thing you do to try to build that trust back with Mac and with the rest of the coaching staff?
You tell him how highly you value him. You tell him the things that you think he does well and the things in the places you're going to take him. I think you can get to this point. I absolutely believe, Mac, you can become an all-pro. And I think you could be a guy that throws for 35 touchdowns and 4,000 yards. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it, okay? Hey, Mac, let's sit down, and I want to first talk about the things, and I want to hear it in your words. What do you think you do well? What formation-wise? How do we call our formations? How do we call our protections? What protections do you feel most comfortable understanding? Where do you want to get challenged? What concepts do you like to see the best? And then you go, what do you not feel comfortable with? Anything, Mac, that you need to tell me right now that, hey, Coach, I don't like 3-step, or, I don't feel I'm good at 5-step out of the gun, or, you know what, I don't like ball faking to my left. I only like it to my right. Okay, why? Why do we feel we struggle with that? Do we think we can get better at it? Okay, great. And then you build off of those things, and you want him to have a very clear vision of who he is right now, who you think he can be, and how he gets there. And it's got to be that very much like he can't feel that you're talking to him. You got to feel that you're talking with him, and that obviously you're you're on this journey together. And you've painted a very clear picture of where you plan to get him there. And transparency and honesty and conviction, and telling them like, hey man, I'm going to coach you hard. I say this to my 11-year-olds. I'm going to tell you the truth. You decide what to do with the truth, not me. And so he needs to know, like, the expectation is going to be high and the standard is going to be high. And he's the guy that's got to kind of apply that. But if he wants to go get it, then we can go do it together.
We're talking with Dan Orlovsky here on the Harbor One Hotline. Dan, Tom Brady's season ended on Monday. Where do you think he plays next year?
I do not believe it's in Tampa. I think there's 4 things that have to be in place for Tom to play again next year, dependent on the team. Number 1, it has to be a maximum of a 2-year Super Bowl window. Okay, so that's going to negate some teams off the bat. Second thing, they have to have a top 5 offensive line, specifically on the interior, 2 guards and a center. Third thing is they got to have 2 pretty darn good perimeter players. I would say high-end perimeter players. Fourth thing is got to have a top 10 defense. Tom's going to be 46. There's just this reality, right? Is he still good? Yes. But there's those 4 things that need to be in place. So that automatically minimizes a bunch of teams. I think the real reality for me as I sit here today, I think there's one team that I feel in right now in the middle of January checks those 4 boxes. That would be Carolina. Carolina's got a 2-year window right now that because of their young talent. They got an offensive line that's probably not top 5 right now, but they're trending towards that. They can get there. DJ Moore is a pretty darn good perimeter player. They would have to add one, and they absolutely have a top 10 defense, and it's in the NFC. So I think like Miami's got some of those. Jets have some of those. Raiders have some of those. Tampa Bay has various. I just don't think there's a ton of teams that fit under that criteria.
I thought you were describing the Niners, Dan. I honestly did. You were saying all those things. I'm like, he's talking about the Niners. He's got to be.
Why? If you were San Francisco, why? Like, why? Why would you do this? Why would you? You just gave up a ton to go get Trey Lance. You have no idea what you have in him. Brock Purdy still hasn't lost as your starting quarterback. And I'm telling everybody, kid can flat out play. Like I don't know where he's going to be in 3 years, or what his potential greatness, quote unquote, is. But if you were them, you're sitting there going, why would I go chase Tom Brady and bring that here?
It's a good question. I think we're just reeling a little bit in surprise from that Carolina answer. So along those lines, what do you see happening with Lamar Jackson? Kind of a pretty odd ending to his year with the Ravens. Do you think he remains a Raven, or do you think somebody else scoops him up? And if so, who?
I think he's a Raven, yes. Ravens are a phenomenal organization. They don't do dumb things often. My football mind tells me moving on from a player like Lamar is dumb. Talent-wise, he is spectacular. The results are what the results are. There's very few guys that have been more productive than him over the last 4 years, both individual performance-wise and team success-wise. If Baltimore sits there, there's two things that I could buy, because I go, you're crazy if you move on from Lamar Jackson. Two things I could buy. Number one, we've built this very unique roster and offense around Lamar, and it hasn't worked. 10 games missed in 2 years. We haven't gotten to where we want to go. We're going to tear it down. Whether I agree with that or not, I can understand that reasoning. And the second thing is the young man has missed 10 games in 2 years, and he's taken 1,000 hits in 5 seasons. We don't want that. We believe that that's going to be an issue for the long haul, and we're going to decide to do something different at quarterback. Again, whether I agree with it or not, I can understand that reasoning. I'll live in the hypothetical world of, if not Baltimore, who? I think Atlanta. He works well with the style of the team right now with Arthur Smith. They got a bunch of young offensive talent, 2 big-bodied receivers in London and Kyle Pitts, and they've got some draft capital to play with. That would be the one team where I can understand.
All right, Dan, before we let you go, division weekend coming up here. Is Buffalo going to get past Cincinnati this time and get to the conference championship? Is it their year?
Yeah, I think a little bit depends on the health of Cincinnati's 2 offensive linemen that kind of got hurt last week. If they're without 3 out of their 5 starters, that's an issue. Buffalo's got to calm Josh down a little bit. If Josh plays a little bit more of a calm football game, I think they're good enough, yes.
All right, we'll leave it right there then. Dan Orlovsky, great stuff as always. Thanks so much for the time today.